Welcome to HortTube, where we talk all things gardening. My name is Jim Putnam, and this is a Jean May Camellia. This is Jean May Sasanqua Camellia, a fall and winter blooming evergreen shrub. Like most Camellia sasanquas, Jean May can end up over 10 feet tall in time and 6 feet wide at the top. It is easy to keep it much smaller than that. Jean May, like most Camellia sasanquas, is best in zone 7 to 11. If you're in zone 7, you would not want to use this plant as a screening plant. The winter winds will damage it. Camellias are slow growing, to say the least. We might only get 4 inches of growth out of these in a year in the ground, and in a container, not even much more than that, which to me makes for a fantastic plant. Slow growing plants always mean less maintenance. Camellia sasanquas are definitely shade-loving evergreen shrubs. You definitely don't want more than a half a day's sun on these plants. They are a little more sun tolerant than Camellia japonicas, but even still, I think a half a day's sun is kind of ideal. I would not put them into deep shade. You probably won't get as many flowers and the plant will grow somewhat thinner. But any place you've got where you're getting a half a day's sun, either in the early morning or in the late afternoon, is kind of ideal. In terms of where we would use Jean May Camellias, if you're using it as a foundation plant, it almost certainly has to go in a corner, someplace where it can really be allowed to get some height. I don't think you could keep this plant under windows, really. If you're using it in zones 8 to 11, it can actually be used as a screening plant and works great as such. But in zone 7, like I said, it needs to go on a foundation and probably best just put on a corner. Camellia sasanquas can also be a spalliate. They can be used, they can be pruned flat to some sort of structure and woven through it and grown flat right up against a house or a wall where you've got no windows on some wall that you want to cover in some greenery. Of course, the flowers are the main draw of Camellia sasanquas, and they're fantastic at it. They'll start blooming in late October and bloom right through early winter. Sometimes buds will last even into January or February unless it gets way too cold. It's an extremely long bloom time. And there's just nothing else that blooms when these are blooming, or very few things that bloom when these are blooming. People in the nursery business tend to really like camellias. It's about the only time of year we're not working 7 days a week, and we actually get to enjoy them as well. The flowers on Jean May are a pale pink color, almost a shell or a coral color. Really fantastic on this plant, and they tend to just drop off. Some of the other varieties of Camellia sasanquas, the flowers will turn brown and kind of hold on to them. This one always just looks very clean. You can see how many buds this plant actually has on it. It's early November now in North Carolina, and this thing's really going to be blooming for a very long period of time. In terms of planting your camellias, this plant's going to be like many leafy evergreen shrubs. It's not going to want to sit in water. We want to mound these up a little bit when we plant them. You'll dig the hole, the depth of the root ball, twice as wide as the root ball. And then if you have clay soils, it's going to be really important on camellias that you mix some sort of chunky material in with them. When you buy the plant, it's almost certainly going to be grown in a pine bark soil conditioner mix. It's just aged pine bark. That's available in bags at most garden centers, and you can mix that 50-50 with the clay that comes out of the hole and use that material to replant your plant. If you have very sandy soils, you may want to switch over to peat moss or compost. Peat moss would probably be ideal with this plant because peat moss tends to be more acidic, and this is an acid-loving plant. So we've dug our hole. We'll put some of that mixture that we just made back in the bottom of it. Take our plant out of the container, put it into the ground, and now it's sitting up about 2 inches. We'll pull that rest of our soil mix up to the edge of it, tamp it down, water it in really well, and then lightly mulch this plant. This plant definitely does not want mulch up on the base of it. Have the mulch just fade out before you reach the bottom of it. If you have pine straw available to you as a mulch, that's kind of ideal with camellias. It breathes really well. It'll allow this plant to dry out between rains. Camellias take a long time to root out in a container, so I doubt very seriously it would be root bound when you pulled it out of the container. If the roots are wrapped around one another really tightly, pull at them some before you put it into the ground so that they start rooting outward instead of continuing to wrap around one another. Like I say, they are very slow to root. Not an aggressive rooting plant at all. In terms of watering these for the first 6 months to 12 months, you'll want to check them periodically. Stick your finger down in the ground, maybe 2 inches, and see if it actually needs water. And if it does, drown the entire space around it really, really well. And then let it dry out again. In terms of future watering, like I've said before, camellias, the best camellias in the state of North Carolina, where I am, are on old abandoned farmhouses where nobody's done any maintenance to them in a long period of time. This is not a plant to put on an automated watering system. You'll definitely kill it. I wouldn't put it on a drip system. I would just water this thing during drought conditions or during really, really dry conditions only. That's the only time it's really ever going to need to be watered. Camellias are acid-loving plants, so any slow-release fertilizer for acid-loving plants is ideal. Any kind of azalea, camellia rhododendron fertilizer, because it's a camellia, would be ideal, and you'll do that in the early spring, maybe mid-March or early April, and then leave it alone. Those fertilizers should last 3 or 4 months and run out by midsummer, which is ideal. In terms of pruning your camellias, they're rarely ever going to need to be pruned because they grow so slowly. You will get the occasional crazy limb on it, but this plant really needs to be allowed to get 8 feet or 10 feet to look its best. I wouldn't put it anywhere where you're trying to keep the thing 4 feet. You probably could keep it 4 feet, but I don't think it would ever look that great. And you'd have to do pruning on it at times where you'd probably be taking flower buds off of it. Camellias are definitely susceptible to T-scale, which is a small insect that will attach itself to the underside of the leaves, typically on the oldest growth in the interior of the plant where the air doesn't move as readily is where we're going to see T-scale. It's just not that big of a deal. It can be controlled with horticultural oil. I don't worry about it on mine. Almost certainly you can grab one of the oldest leaves down in the middle of the plant and flip it over, especially in the late summer, and you'll see a little scale on it. It's just not that big of a deal to me. Deer do like camellias about as much as we do, and they will take the buds off of them in the fall. So if you have deer issues, I wouldn't put them out on the edge of your yard. The other issue that can easily be avoided is root rot issues. If you're planting them properly by elevating them and not over mulching them and not watering them all the time or putting them on an automated irrigation system, then you shouldn't have an issue with root rot. So what are you waiting for? Even you can grow the low maintenance fall and winter flowering Jean May Camellia. Thank you for watching, and if this video was helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Also comment below with any questions you have about camellias. Thanks again.